Warning. This video contains sensitive topic, which some viewers may find offensive or disturbing.
What's the craziest reason you had to fire someone? I was a bartender per bar manager. This guy came in one night and said he was an aspiring DJ and asked if we would consider hiring him to come in just on Sunday nights to DJ for us. He said we wouldn't have to pay him at first. He would just take tips and we could renegotiate after he helped to build up our Sunday night crowd. He lasted less than 3 months. He drove away so much business and I got so many complaints. He played the same songs every week, and when people made requests for commonly known songs, he had no idea who the musicians, were. I had to fire someone who was working for free. He was a nice guy, which is the only reason he lasted as long as he did. Not my personal experience, but one fellow contractor had a safety guy for 6 months. One weekend he took a trip out of town for non-work related reasons, but used the company truck, and charged it all on the company credit card. On his way up there he ran a random person off the road, who just so happened to be one of the owners of another contractor who works closely with the one who employed this guy. Shortly after he was fired, and I'm sure criminal charges were being brought against him. A couple weeks later his wife calls his former employer saying he had called her randomly and killed himself in his truck on the side of the highway. Me and another colleague went searching for records of this guy. Couldn't find anything, no claims of a suicide in the local paper where he supposedly killed himself at. Thought it was weird, but whatever. It turns out this guy falsified all his qualifications and job experience. Fast forward a month later, and I heard through the grapevine that the original contractor who had employed this guy received a call from some contractor across country because he applied for work there and put them down as his previous employer. He faked his own death to get out of trouble with the company, then proceeded to put them down on his resume, not expecting anyone to check his references. Lol. Years ago, at a lumber company, had a guy, less than 2 hours after he started on his first day, pick up his car with a forklift and stand underneath it to see what was rattling when he drove. Fired a high schooler because his girlfriend kept showing up and they would disappear behind the racks. I told him his girlfriend was banned, trying to not fire him, and she kept sneaking back. Worked in an office and they hired a girl from a temp agency to help me. She wouldn't do anything unless I walked her through each step after telling her she had to do it. Hey, an estimate just arrived on the fax right next to you. Complete the quote and send it back. Come to find out she was playing Spider and Solitaire on her computer. She was also sneaking out back, and the warehouse guys thought she was doing drugs. I told my boss get rid of her. I would rather work alone than babysit her, so he called the temp agency and told them to stop sending her. She showed up the next day, so boss sent her home and called the agency saying, hey, she is useless, stop sending her. She showed up again the next day. This went on for over a week. The people at the temp agency said they told her to stop showing, but she kept coming in every morning. Mind you, usually 10 to 20 minutes late. My boss wouldn't say anything to her face, so finally I said, hey, we can't afford to pay you, so we had to let you go through the temp agency. They should have told you. She was all, oh, I thought they were joking. I was so glad she was gone. I worked retail, and we had an employee that would hide and take naps inside racks of clothes. Somehow that wasn't the reason we fired her. We fired her for stealing clothes and then wearing them to work. At a retail job, we had a kid come in and punch in for the day, then go home. Would come back at quit-in time and punch out. We use separate attendance and pay software. We had someone punch into the pay software at 5 a.m. Go home, come back and work his scheduled 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. and clock out at 10 p.m. Opening and closing crew aren't too familiar with each other, so he wasn't caught until Big Boss, who is normally a mid, came in early one day and saw him doing it. A guy shaved, trimmed off his pubes and left them scattered across a shared desk in a shared office. When confronted, he pulled a George Costanza, oh, is that frowned upon? Not too crazy, more stupid than crazy. One of the programmers on my team was sitting at his desk looking at porn. And this is cubicle land. No offices. My director walked into the area to talk to me and saw it. Then it was the first thing he told me about. So I got up and walked over for a look myself, and there it was. Me and the director looked at each and I said, I gotta take care of this. So we walked back to HR. I told them what was going on and what we saw, and they told me to fire him. So I did. He lost a $110,000 job for looking at porn on his computer at work. When I worked in hotels, I was promoted to front desk manager. My first task was to hire someone. I ended up getting this very charismatic guy that was a little over the top but overall seemed like a solid employee. After I end up hiring him, and on his first day he asked me if it's okay if he carries his gun on him, and I think that's strange, but it is his right, and the owners honestly didn't care so long as he had his license. He was never able to produce a license, so he was never able to bring this handgun on the property. About a week into his employment, we find out that he's been calling guests, specifically the really attractive females, and asking them if they need any overnight service. We were very understaffed, and my boss decided that instead of firing him, we were going to take him off the desk and put him on basic groundsman duties. Part of these duties included driving the shuttle to the airport and back, and also filling up the shuttle when it got low on fuel. Which means that he had access to the gas card. Our accountant confronts me one day about some very strange charges to the gas card. Apparently we had been filling up the shuttle near daily at anywhere between $20 to $45. We looked into it and got the surveillance footage from the gas station, and it turns out was this kid filling up his friends' cars and even his own car. When confronted, he tells my boss that I said it was okay. Obviously that wasn't true, and they didn't believe him. He ended up also being my first termination. One of the other employees Googled his name and found out he was a child predator. He was in a sexual relationship with a 12-year-old girl when he was 26. I also found out that day that we did not actually do background checks, we just said we did and assumed anyone with a history wouldn't bother applying. I work at an art studio where we teach classes and sell pottery that our artists make for others to paint. I'm one of the artists and the manager. I started getting a funny feeling about one of my employees. She wasn't doing anything blatantly wrong. Just seemed to work really slowly sometimes. Request insignificant but kinda odd schedule changes. And have different break habits from the other staff. I started feeling like she was stealing, but this is a really small business, so I didn't have her on camera or any way to really prove it. Until she accidentally sent me a video of herself painting pieces that I made from her home. I was a florist and had a 40-something woman delivering for me. I received a call from the building manager of a brand new office building, with only one tenant, telling me my driver wrote on the elevator wall with a Sharpie. They had video showing that she was the only person to use the elevator during the time the vandalism took place. The worst part for me was, this happened a few days before Valentine's Day. Fired a guy for looking to pay someone to cast black magic on the owner and the owner's family to bewitch them into giving him a raise, and, ironically, never firing him. Only reason I found out was because he asked someone else in the office for help in finding a witch doctor to cast the spells, and word got round. No one wanted to be in the same room as him after that. When I confronted him, he said the devil made him do it, so it wasn't his fault. I live in the Middle East. I definitely did not wake up expecting to fire someone for black magic that day. Side note, practicing black magic is literally a death sentence here. The guy had somehow hung on by the skin of his teeth when caught making plastic model funny cars at his desk. Pro tip: throwing a newspaper over the model doesn't hide the smell of the glue. But when a client called complaining about our hero trying to sell him golf clubs out of the trunk of his car, he was gone. I am a chef at an upscale restaurant. The saute cook has a lobster dish on his station that involves a technique called deglazing that involves alcohol, so in turn the pan catches on fire briefly and flames up. When you do it correctly, hard to do it incorrect, the alcohol is cooked off and the flame goes out. Every time he made this dish he would deglaze the pan, catch it on fire and then blow it out. blowing his own germs and nastiness all over someone's food and everything in the blast radius. That was a week ago. Fired him after he did it multiple times after being asked not to. Maybe it's because of the current state of affairs. But I couldn't believe a trained cook would do that. In the early 2000s I managed a coffee shop that required the customers' names to be put on the cup. One guy looked like he was doing it, but upon closer inspection on some cups he was writing an IP address. Turns out he was running an illegal sports book out of the shop. He did quit before I had to technically fire him because he found out I knew. Had to fire a guy for coming to work high on meth and getting lost in a closet while painting it. Asked what the deal was and was toldish I am having a conversation. That was his last day LMAO. I worked at a retail store and found one of my coworkers was using the company iPad that we used to play music and order lunches to go on Craigslist and search for hookups. She didn't even bother to delete the search history. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and hit the notification button. See you next time.